Hello, David from Scratch. Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Absolutely. So you're on your second season. I love this show. Talk a little bit about filming in the pandemic because this is a new ingredient into the show. Obviously, world
It was
shut down. What was it like filming?
oh, it was bananas. It was banana. Aside from the fact that like everything was supposed to start April, like literally we were flying to I think it was Peru. We were flying into Peru, supposed to be the 22nd, and April 15th, the international airport in Lima shut down and didn't open again for till we went in December. But that was like, oh my goodness. And all of the places we had Australia and Japan and like every single one was no. So um the US was open. Certain parts of the US was open for Americans. So we were like, okay, we'll start here. But then even there, like we were gonna do an episode with Martha Stewart in it was gonna be New England. And we were going to either visit her in her New York, upstate New York place, or in her Maine. She has a really cool estate on Mount Desert Island. And both places didn't let Californians. They were like, Californians became persona non grata. I don't know if you remember that during that time.
I do.
Like,
I mean, I'm in New York, so I remember I also was persona non grata for a while.
In other places, yeah.
In other places, yes.
So our New York, like all our East Coast, basically, those went out the window. There was a really amazing restaurant that was actually feeding people. They turned into almost like a soup kitchen in the middle of the pandemic, and we wanted to do them, but we couldn't get into New York. So that was number one, and Europe was really hard. Our showrunner, producer, Shannon Hunt, I mean, I don't know what pact she made with the devil, but she got us into places and worked out a schedule that worked. There was only one real pandemic. Well, there were a couple of hiccups. Like we landed in Wyoming, the restaurant we were supposed to do, we got a call. He said the whole staff is down with COVID. So then we switched restaurants, and it turned out to be a wonderful episode there. We went with this really amazing Native American chef who has one of the top food trucks in America. And she, I mean, we would never have, that wouldn't have happened without COVID. And then where were we? Oh, in Malta, we were going to go make cheese with a shepherd. And he called and he said, yeah, I'm feeling sick. We were like, but you can go make the cheese with my brother. He's at the farm. We were like, when was the last time you saw your brother? He said, yesterday. We were like, we're not going to see your brother.
Did you worry you'd get stuck in some countries, as you were filming?
We got stuck in Croatia. But it wasn't, I mean, it was COVID related in the sense that the rules were so intense in the EU. We were supposed to go to Portugal, and our whole crew, one of our crew members had the wrong visa to get into Schengen. I mean, I've learned about international travel to levels that, like, there's the greater EU, and then there's a more specific EU that's the Schengen, and these are the countries that are in there. So we had to anyway, and truth be told, he had told all of us, I don't think my visa gets me in, and we were like, it's fine. And then
if this travel show doesn't work out, you can always get a job at the State Department, right?
Yeah, or as a travel agent, but beyond it was a wild ride, even beyond the pandemic. Like there was a parliamentary coup in Peru, there was a hurricane in Costa Rica, and it was just everything that they could throw at us, they threw at us. And,
so how long does it usually take to film an episode? And did you find that it took a little bit longer during this time?
Yeah, it took a bit longer. Normally it takes us 8 days. We land, then it's really like a 6-day shoot, and then it's the wrap up, but I think we did, Kenya was 16 days just because of logistics. Croatia, when we couldn't get into Portugal, we ended up staying in Croatia a little longer. Yeah, some places it was smooth. The US, because we were flying domestic and no one was really flying, so that was kind of easier. And then we drove. I think our Utah to Wyoming was a drive with everybody, which was pretty fun. And we were kind of like in control of our own destinies there. Yeah, it was a very surreal. And then different parts of America were handling COVID differently. So Utah was pretty locked down and everybody was masked. Wyoming,
not at all. So what was something you saw that, on the front lines of the pandemic outside of the US, something that surprised you? Maybe the differences of how they handled it, or just in general, something that surprised you about what you saw abroad versus here?
Well, New York and Cali were epicenters. New York, even more, I think. My brother was in Brooklyn, and the stories that my childhood friends would tell me what was going on just sounded like, it almost made me feel like I should go back to the city, because just to be in with, comrades in arms against what was going on. But there was a moment where we were in Europe, and Europe wasn't really where we were in Croatia. It hadn't really hit yet. And I think it was just behind us, on our way out, the lines to get your nose swab were long. And we were like, oh, okay. People were coughing, and you were like, okay, it's coming here now. But
were you in the capital in Dubrovnik?
So we were in Zagreb, and then we were in Istria on the coast. But there was much less wherever we went. California was by far the most. That was a hot spot. And so there was this moment where I was like, we were Googling, we're going to go to Kenya. And I was Googling okay, Croatian rates in Kenya. I think everybody was looking at those graphs, right? There was a couple of websites that everyone was checking out that time. And we saw a headline, COVID exploding in Kenya. And we were like, oh no, what are we going to see when we get there? And then when you read deeper, it was 52 cases. I was like, get me out of Riverside County. I want to go to Kenya. So that was a big difference, that America really wasn't handling it well, in that first year. Half the country was like, it doesn't exist. And the rest of the world was either handling it well, or, with Kenya, the reason was it doesn't have a lot of infrastructure. So to get, the cities hadn't gotten it yet. And so it hadn't even spread out to the other places. Well,
you mentioned driving to Wyoming. We talked a little bit about Kenya and Malta and Croatia. What was your most memorable moment while traveling and creating meals with the locals in these places? What's something that sticks out that you're like, yeah, that I'm going to remember that forever?
Wow. Well, every episode has moments that are just sublime, where you're sitting there and you're like, I'll never do this again. And this is something that, if I had even thought it was possible, it would have been a bucket list moment, but you never even. So there's a moment in Kenya where we went foraging in a sacred forest. That's basically the only people who really can go there are the shaman. And they took us to get medicinal herbs for a beer that we were making. And then the shaman did a foretelling. That's sort of how they lead the Maasai, their tribe. They are fortune tellers. And that's kind of how they help the tribe navigate. And so we were sitting in this little glen on the top of a mountain in a forest in Kenya, and baboons had come down to the water on the other side of this little lake. And you're just like, wow. And we had harvested these amazing herbs, some of which don't even have scientific names because, they have local names. And then we made this amazing beer and creme brulee with this herb, this root that tastes like vanilla, basically. But at the same time, in Utah, I went up to this Arctic lake to fish for trout. Um, the reason they took me there was because I had been failing at fly fishing up to that point. And they were like, last week, a 6-year-old got like 7 fish out of this lake. Don't worry, you're going to get fish here. And I didn't get any fish. But there we were in an alpine lake, snow around us. Each place has its own unique story to tell about food production. In Malta, we went down to the water line, which is like, it takes about 30 years for rainwater to drain down into this aquifer that sits under the island. And it sits there because fresh water is heavier than seawater. So it literally is like this lens of fresh water sitting above the ocean underneath Malta. And you go down into this, like, you're going into an old mine shaft, right? And you get down there and it's like you're walking through the water, and they give you this long stick because there is a chain, you're walking on a path, and right next to you on the path is a drop that goes down into the deep. So you're like making sure that you're not stepping into that drop. Wow. I leaned down with a cup and picked up my water for that episode because we were going to make a soup. So it was just cool.
Well, Brooklyn boy, born and raised.
Bronx boy. Not allowed.
Bronx boy.
Yeah. Bronx and Brooklyn. At least in my era, you're not allowed to say, yeah.
You're not allowed to say that. But hunting and foraging, not really skills you picked up. It's not like you're diving for food in the East River. It's not like you're using a hunting bow on the L train, although
that probably would have been your last meal if you were eating something from the East River.
So did something a skill that you picked up, did it come particularly and surprisingly easy to you, or were they all a little bit of a learning curve and you found yourself kind of scurrying to learn these new techniques, these new skills?
You're always confronted with your inability, your inexpertise, and you're standing next to experts who know what they're doing. So it really does, you have to have some humility because when you're not good at something, who wants to do things that they're not good at? And this whole show is me just walking around doing things I'm not good at. But I think that's sort of why I wanted to do it, right? Like, I think in today's world, everyone considers themselves an expert, particularly when they're on the internet, right?
Yes. Everybody has a Google doctorate, a Facebook doctorate these days.
That's right. The medical doctor of Google. And I think that when confronted, people need to be confronted by real expertise. And they need to see what it is actually like for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing to be faced with trying to make food for themselves, to grow, to harvest, to hunt, to fish food. The very basic necessity, which you would think that we all had some connection to it, right?
Yeah.
I was just reading this really interesting book where, people know more about the stock market than photosynthesis, which is the basis of all life.
Human life, yeah.
That's it. It all comes, whether you eat only plants or you eat animals that eat only plants, we all come from this one sort of chemical reaction, that takes water and splits it and makes oxygen and feeds plants. And so that's kind of at the heart of this, to reach back. And there were very few positives that happened with COVID. But in the wake of so much death and economic collapses, and, I think people did get back to things that they had lost, whether it was going back with family and really not spending all their money out at restaurants, but and that's sad for the restaurant workers, but it was something that was gained for people cooking at home with their families, right?
Yes, there was a surge in baking. There was a surge in cooking.
There was no yeast
in the shows.
There was no yeast in the supermarket, which was a good thing. So I feel like learning to work with your hands to make food gives you confidence in yourself. It also, you're resting on the knowledge of generations. It ties you to the people before us, the people around us, the community. It takes 80 people to make a slice of pizza, right?
Yeah.
So we are not alone. Anyway.
So, you know, you mentioned a little bit about the coup. You witnessed the aftermath of a hurricane, a world environmental chaos, and a country amidst of a military coup. You had a front row seat to the polluted planet, but also to the hardworking people who fight those wars just to feed us. When you talk to the locals and work side by side with them to put a meal on the table from start to plate, what do they say the average person, me, everyone else, can do to kind of help the planet and make what they do worthwhile, make it mean something?
Well, there are two fights that are going on that food producers, food workers are at the front lines of. One is sort of social and economic justice. Those people need to get paid more. You travel around the world and people are living in dire poverty. The people who bring us the most essential food. And so, you know, you see it today, the fights for minimum wage, for a higher minimum wage, the striking that's going on at food production. We need to get behind them and support them. I think everybody talks about, like, you know, occupations that we all think need to make more, nurses and teachers, and food producers are one of those. So that's one side. And then the other side is environmentally, they're at the forefront, right on the front lines, whether it's droughts or floods or rising seawater or no fish. They deal with this. This is a daily occurrence. I mean, I was in South Africa working with a large sorghum producer who has the newest fangled technology, and he is trying to figure out what to do about a 7-year drought.
Yeah.
That was followed by a two-year floods, and then followed by drought. So, and if we wake up and there's no wheat, there's no yeast in the supermarkets, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So when we talk about fixing environmental problems, it's real. And that's another thing that people can stand up, you know, side by side with the people who are fighting for sort of to save the environment. That's another thing that, you know, individuals can do.
Yeah, without a planet, we don't really have a place to live.
Right.
So
That's
you
right.
mentioned Kenya, and obviously making beer. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And you had the honor of making things with the Maasai. Were there any behind the scenes stories from Africa that you could share? Because that's fascinating. And the Maasai, the goat herding population, the shaman, all of that is must have been a blessing for you to be able to be a part of.
It was transformative in a way that, like, this is a place that you've heard about since you were young. You watched National Geographic or Mutual of Omaha. Like, this is a place that you've seen since you were a young kid. It was almost, what's
for
up?
For me, out of Africa. It's like one of my favorite
out of
movies.
Africa, yeah.
Yeah.
And it almost like one of the first sort of like scientific things that you ever learn, like animals, lions and zebra, right? That's full imprinting when you're a baby. And so to go and to sort of work with the Maasai to forage. So we went to Aboma, which is like their village, and the village is surrounded by, the gate is almost is acacia trees or very thorny branches. And
I've seen this before.
Right. And then you go in, and in the middle of it are little smaller pens also made from these acacia trees. And that's where they keep livestock. And then their houses are literally ringed. So they put themselves between lions or leopards who might get in and the livestock. So their livestock is literally at the center of their community, and it represents wealth and, you know, how well the tribe is, that village is doing. And so you see that. And then you also, what we got to learn along the way is the huge changes that are going on in Kenya, where kids are starting to want to go to school, so they don't really want to watch, the cows nomadically anymore. And I don't think their parents want them to either. They want their kids to, get a job in this insanely fast-paced economy that's sort of happening. Kenya's ramped up in the last 10 years, so you're seeing a glimpse of the last 500 years, and then you're seeing the future as well. And that was just to learn, to constantly learn every step of the way was an amazing experience. To be surrounded by such knowledge, the shaman, have a handed down history for 500 years there, the Maasai. So it was like getting their perspective was something that would, it's one of those bucket lists that I didn't even know was possible.
Right. Like a privilege that you can't believe you even were asked to, you were given.
Allowed. They have to accept you. You have to be allowed. They have to let you come in. So they meet you, and then they go, and then they go up and talk about you. And then they come back and they're like, okay.
Yeah.
You're all right.
I love that they're so community oriented, and that's fascinating about protecting the livestock. Where would you like to go in season 3? So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that's going to happen. Yeah. Where's your bucket list place for season 3?
Well, some of the places that we were not unable to go in season 2. I really want to go to Japan. I want to do Australia, Singapore. I want to do Maine. I want to do something with Martha. I'd love to go to NOLA, to New Orleans. What a food city. They got great food culture there. I want to try Cuban food, maybe in Miami, and maybe with a trip to Cuba. Look, the world is, there's so many food cultures. There's so many people doing incredible things. And you can kind of spin the globe, put your finger down and be like, oh,
we'll go there.
We'll go there.
I think last time I spoke to you for season 1, we spoke about you cutting down on your meat intake after you filmed. I remember you talking about you wanted the meal to count for something because you knew how hard it was to go from cow to your plate.
Yeah.
So now that you've done this for 2 years now, did you learn anything from these new experiences that opened or changed your mind about your own food practices? Have you added anything to that cachet of new ideas in your practices?
Well, I have a young son now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And he was very young. I think he was still just having his mother's milk when we did season 1. But he eats vegetarian because ethically and health-wise, I think it's just better. He can make that decision, and he'll ask for bits of meat on our plates and stuff like that. But I think it should be a decision. It's a personal decision. It's hard. As someone who wasn't raised killing animals, each episode, particularly when there is a larger animal slaughter, it's intense, it's emotional, and it wears on you. I remember, we were at a pig farm in Croatia, and we pull up, and these guys are doing it ethically. At the forefront of sort of like, the pig is it's not a industrialized slaughter.
Right. There's a difference between industrial farming. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even still, like I was sitting in the car just being like, oh, I really don't want to kill something today, but I eat meat still, and I enjoy it. My culture that I live in, my family, my greater friends, everybody eats meat. So it's sort of like it's a larger decision than just health and ethics. It's sort of like, am I going to remove myself in some way from my family, these larger group of friends? And so I really think the people who do it, who are vegan and go vegetarian, they're incredibly strong. And
yes, I think any reduction though helps, and any
Agreed.
Yeah, any reduction house. My wife is vegan. I am not vegan. I eat a lot of vegan. Yeah, I think it makes a big difference, even if you just take a small step.
Agreed. Meat as a condiment on a plate, as opposed to the center of the plate of every
Right.
meal, right? You can do that, and that's kind of what I mean. Look, we eat vegetarian 5 to 6 days a week, and then we have our LA cheat days, and that's good health wise, and it's good for the environment. And it also is like we have the will as humans. We can do this. Like it doesn't own us. Our food urges don't own us. We can decide, and we have to, or else
we won't have an option. We won't have an option.
That's
right.
So
I think season 2 from Scratch looks fantastic. It's out now on the History Channel and FYI. But what's next for you, David? Are you working on any other projects? Or are you just getting season 3 in order now? Or
we have this. There's a spinoff that we've been kicking around, and I think we're very close. It's pretty exciting. It's in the same vein. And I've been writing a book.
Fantastic.
One of the benefits of the pandemic is that when you flew places, you couldn't go out to dinner or drinks or hang out, really. You kind of like went back to your room at the hotel, and I'd be sitting there. My family wasn't with me, so I was by myself. And the crew, everyone, it was very, like, we all had to be masked and like kind of keep distanced on the road as well. So I was able to write. I'm on chapter 8 of 10 chapters. It'll be out next year. And it's kind of like sort of what 3 years going around the world sourcing food was like on a deeper level. I'm able to tell stories that you don't have to fit into a 40-minute, in between the commercials. So there's some really interesting stories that we were unable to tell on screen, but that I think are like funny and sad and dynamic and adventurous. And
well, I can't wait to read that.
That's the big thing. Yeah.
When it comes out, we'll have to talk again about that. What would you like to say to the fans of this show? Because they love it. I love it. I think it's great.
I'm glad. I'm so thankful that people have responded to it. We were really fighting uphill. Our executives tell us all the time that like in the world where sort of, cat fights and slip and fall, pratfalls is what's taken over cable, or like, kids games, people trying to cross lava, that to have a show where you're trying to investigate sort of semi-serious things or serious things, and then and put that medicine in the ice cream, of an adventure is it's hard, but that people like it. And it got us another season, which we really didn't know. After season 1, we kind of took a shot, and we were like, who knows if this will get picked up? And thankfully it did, because people liked it. So
I think the marriage between travel and food is always going to be a seller for the population. And during the pandemic,
and they got trapped.
Wanted to travel, and everyone definitely was eating. So
that's right. It was sort of perfect. Like our first episode premiered, I think it was February 16th, and a month later, our ratings went through the roof because everyone was trapped. March 10th, I was in New York meeting with Martha Stewart to do this spinoff that we were going to do. And Martha so she doesn't do like, you got to meet her face to face. She doesn't do things over the internet. If you're going to do a deal together, she wants you to come and meet her, shake hands, like old school. And I was sitting there and I was like, Martha wants me to go to New York. I'm going to give her COVID and I'm going to kill Martha Stewart. This is not good. Why is she making me do this? But I got a gas mask on. So March 8th, I flew to New York. It was still like bubbling, right? And I met Martha. We shook hands. We had a great meeting. There was really nobody in her office. She was sliding like Martha Stewart sweet potato fries down the length of this long conference table while I was eating them. And they were great. I mean, obviously. And then I left and I was in New York City. And I was like, I'll get a buddy of mine and we'll go out for dinner. And we were at dinner and I went downstairs to use the restroom. And I was coming up checking my phone. And the NBA shut down and Tom Hanks had COVID. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And that was really the beginning.
Yeah, it was the beginning, and interestingly enough, Tom Hanks kind of started it off, and you guys kind of go back a long way.
That's
Funny
right.
enough, I made a comment that and the big cast between you and Elizabeth and Tom is the only one that has invaded me in interviews. My fingers are always crossed.
Well, hopefully, I'll give him a call.
Oh, well, thank you
I
so
owe him
much.
a call anyway.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, David. I look forward to season 3, hopefully, and fans can watch this, like I said, on the History Channel and FYI from scratch. David Moscow, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.